Guys, and welcome to my second art journal flip through. So today I'm going to try to talk while filming, which is something I've never done before, so hopefully it goes well and hopefully the audio is okay. So this time I used a Moleskine art edition sketchbook, and I believe it's the 4x7 size. I really liked this journal a lot better than my last one because my last journal didn't lay flat, so I felt really restricted in what I could do with it. The pages are super thick. I believe these pages are 165 GSM. The paper could really take a lot of different mediums, including watercolor and acrylic. For watercolors, it could take a good amount, but I wouldn't go overboard and do like a whole full piece in watercolor just because the paper would start to peel and disintegrate a little bit. So I'll go through the pros and cons of this journal, I guess. So the pros are that the paper is really thick and it lies super flat, and the size is really nice to work with. It's a little bit small, but it means that I don't have to take hours doing each spread unless it's super detailed. Some of the cons though are that it's a little bit pricey. It's about $19.95 US, but I believe the money is actually worth it. If you want a cheaper option, I've heard the Leuchtturm sketchbook is a pretty good dupe for the Moleskine. Another con, which might be minimal, for example, the first page is like, I don't know if you can see, but it's like attached to this page and not free to open flat. So I thought that was a little bit annoying, and I originally wasn't going to even fill this page because that bothered me, but I ended up filling it anyway. And then another con is that sometimes when you use a lot of water, okay, I'll show you if I find an example, but sometimes when you use water, the water will bleed into the seam of the book and you'll be able to see the colors through the seams on the next page. But I'll show you when we come to that. So I guess let's start with the flip through. So the inside cover of my journal is just filled with a lot of stickers from artists that I like. I like having these here because it inspires me and makes me feel more creative because it's like kind of a creative mess. These two are actually stickers I made myself. This one is from Cheyenne Barton. This one is from Somebody's Art. These are digital downloads from Mellow Days. I'll link everything down below that I'm mentioning. So this is the first page of my journal, but it's actually the last spread I did, so I'll go back to that at the end. So this is the first spread that I did in this journal, and it was for a collab with an 80s theme, and as you can tell, I was super excited to work in this journal because it lay flat, and in my last journal it was really frustrating that it didn't lie flat, so I used a lot of colors, and I actually got a new set of acrylics as a gift from my mom, so I used those in this spread. And the reason why I have a piece of paper here is because with acrylics, the pages tend to stick together, especially if you use like really textured paint. And as you can see, the pages near the seam stuck together and kind of ripped the paint. I've tried using an acrylic varnish to seal the pages, but I don't know if maybe I'm not using enough coats, but it's still not working super well. So if you have any suggestions about sealing acrylic paint so it doesn't stick together, please let me know, because I'm still having issues with that. And this next page was for a body positivity collab. It was my first time working in watercolor in a while because my last journal, the pages were too thin to use watercolors. So I did a very like abstract cloud design and then made them a little less abstract with the colored pencils to indicate the shape of the clouds. But I really like how this figure turned out. I think she looks really pretty even though she's very like simple. This one was for Flower Week, I think. I only did one of the prompts out of the 5, but I really like this one. This one is painted with acrylics, and the sketch was made with fine liners. And the spread probably took about like 8 hours, which is a lot, but I really like how it turned out. And this was for Pride Month. This is actually the first watercolor portrait I attempted to do, and I remember just being really scared about putting the paint down, so she's not super rendered or realistic, but I think as a first attempt it was okay. As you see throughout my journal, I get a lot more confident with the watercolors, and I think confidence really helps when you're trying new things, because I didn't really practice portraits that much with watercolors, but with more confidence I could see the improvement. Here's another one for Pride Month. And I did this one for Juneteenth, which is the day that the slaves were announced to be officially free in Texas, I believe. And I thought I would just make a little tribute because this is the first year that I actually heard of Juneteenth, even though it's been a holiday for a long time. And it's kind of ridiculous that it's not a national holiday. This one was for an animal collab, but obviously I had to make it into a portrait. It was really fun drawing these animals, even though I don't draw them very often. And this is one of my favorite spreads, and I think it's a favorite of a lot of people. It got a really great response on Instagram, which is really nice, and it was inspired by this poem by @JournalPal. And this was kind of like the most rendered original piece that I did, and I was really proud of myself for doing something original because I find it really difficult not to use references. I mean, I did use a reference for the outline of the face, but otherwise this is all from my head. And I've gotten a lot of questions about where I get inspiration for some of these spreads, and a lot of the time I just scroll through Pinterest and I have a board of just like pretty poems and pretty words, and I'll go through that board and sometimes I'll see a poem that sparks an idea in my head, and then I'll go and try to find a reference that fits what I have in my head, and I'll try to use that to create a spread. This was actually done for my July art challenge. I did this one first because this is the first idea that I had, but this was, I think, like the 5th prompt. But I used a reference of just like a normal person and made her into an alien, which is kind of cool. And then here again, you can see that the paint has ripped a little bit, which is sad. But I really like the colors of her. This was another thing that I did for my July challenge. The prompt was to use just one color, and I actually wasn't really sure what to do, so I just did a portrait in blue ink, and then I found a quote that I thought matched it. So sometimes I'll find a quote and then do a spread, and then sometimes I'll find a reference on Pinterest and create a spread out of that and find a quote that fits it. So it's not always the same for creating the concept of these spreads. This was for the self-love prompt of my art challenge. And then here's the second watercolor portrait that I ever did. I took a class on Skillshare about watercolor portraits, and I learned a lot about mixing colors, and I used a lot of what I learned in this portrait. And as you can see, you can tell that I was feeling a lot more confident after just like drawing a lot. From this spread to this spread, the portraits are very different. So it's really cool being able to see that development. And this is a study that I did of Monet's bridge over water lilies. I tried to make another tattoo girl, kind of, but this one with color. I kind of like the black and white one better. For this spread, I was just really craving to paint an eye with alternative colors. And then after I painted the eye, I needed to fill the rest, so I just drew some purple flowers and some leaves that I thought the color matched well with the purple. And then after I drew all this, I found this quote that matched it. Yeah, so a lot of the time I don't have a full concept. I'll just start drawing something that's in my head and the spread will kind of organically come out. I don't know if that's a good way of working, to not have an idea of what you're doing, but I think it's fun and it's interesting to see what comes out at the end. And then this one I did in colored pencil, which is something I don't use super often. I always think it's really impressive when artists are like professionals with colored pencils and can blend them really nicely, especially for skin tones. I struggled a lot with these skin tones and they're not quite right, but I think they turned out okay. And then for this spread, I actually didn't have the idea to add these kind of like flower cutouts until the very end, and I thought it looked super cute. If you watch the show Dark, you'll recognize these two people. This one was really fun because the paint strokes were super like flowy and not really exact, and I really like how the portraits came out. And this one was for a sunflower collab. So for this one, I did have an idea of what I wanted. I kind of wanted a sunflower, and then I wanted a portrait to mirror the sunflower. So that's what I did. And I tried to make it more clear that they're mirroring each other by putting the butterflies. It's not exactly the effect I wanted, but I like the concept behind it. And this was painted with acrylics, both of these. For this one, I had a really hard time coming up with the concept. This was for a contrasting concepts collab. You were supposed to create a spread including two opposing concepts. So for this one, I did quiet and loud, and I tried to make her in black and white to make her seem quiet, but then the background is very loud and colorful. And it was fun doing this abstract thing. I'm really not great with abstract art, but you know, once in a while, you should try something you're not used to. And this one was for a Van Gogh collab. At first I was just gonna do like a straight study of the painting, but obviously I had to add a person because when do I not add people to my spreads? And I painted this one on a day when I was feeling kind of sad, but after I painted this, oh, this is supposed to be here. But then after I painted this, I felt a lot better. So yeah, I often use painting as a way of therapy because I don't actually go to therapy, but I should. But for now, I'll just use painting. And then this was another kind of therapeutic spread. I used a reference for the pose, but then I kind of changed it to make it look like me a little bit. So I changed the hair to be longer, and then I added these piercings, which I actually do have. And this was a very large experiment with the fine liners and using small strokes to render a portrait. And I kept the face very minimal with shading, and I actually like how that turned out because I normally do add shading, but sometimes it's hard with young faces because they don't have wrinkles, so it's difficult to add shading without making the face look dirty. And I got a few questions on Instagram about what tutorials to watch for portrait drawing. And to be honest, I haven't really watched any tutorials necessarily, but I do watch videos of people drawing faces. For example, I watch a YouTuber called justjudysart, who is really talented, and just watching her work is super helpful in learning how to draw stuff. And I also watch Minnie Small, who has a video about the 100 Heads challenge, and watching her draw was also really helpful. So I'll link a few videos down below that I think are helpful but aren't necessarily tutorials. I think the best way to learn to draw is just to try it yourself and figure out your own process, because someone else's process might not work for you. This one is for a Studio Ghibli collab. I was really scared about painting these portraits, especially with acrylic paint, because acrylic paint dries really quickly, which makes it difficult to blend, and for clouds you need a lot of blending. So I actually started out on this side, and then as I worked towards this side, I figured out a process, and And it actually turned out really good, I think. This painting did take a long time though. So a note about working with acrylics is that it does take a long time because the paint dries quickly and sometimes you have to paint over again if you don't work fast enough. I sketched this spread actually when I was at this winery, and then I went home and painted it, and it's not super detailed. As you can see, like the people are very basic, but I like having this in here as a memory. This is watercolor, by the way. This is also watercolor. So for this, I started with the concept of a girl looking in a mirror and kind of not recognizing herself. And I didn't really have an idea of how I wanted to paint it or anything. And I also kind of came up with this rose idea on the spot. So when I had this concept, I searched on Pinterest and just searched like girl looking in a mirror. And I found a reference that was kind of what I wanted, and I changed it a little bit, but that's how this spread came to be. And then this one was for an art contest, and the prompt was this quote. So I found a reference that was kind of like a girl in shadow, but with a little bit of light. And then I painted that in monochrome blue, which I think looked really cool. This also took a very long time. I'm still not really great at painting portraits with acrylics because it is so difficult to mix the colors together, but it was easy with just one color. I don't know if I would be able to do as well with actual skin tones. And then this was for another collab. I really like how this portrait came out, and then I added this tear at the end randomly, but I think it worked. And then this one is the most minimal thing that I have ever drawn, but I thought that the minimalism added to the message, which is that when you're focusing on perfection, you can't really focus on anything else. So I thought having a really blank background would add to that. And this is actually an outfit that I wear a lot, so the striped t-shirt and the loose-fitting jeans. So I thought that was like a nice personal addition. And then for this one, a poet on Instagram called Secret of Shadows asked me to create some artwork based on one of her poems, and she wanted it to be like a brownish pastel-y color scheme. And it was really interesting working with that restriction. I think I did a good job, maybe. It's not the best, like this blanket kind of looks weird, but you can tell it's a blanket, so that's good. This is when the Taylor Swift album came out, and of course I had to do a spread based on it. It was really fun to do this 20s hairstyle, and I really have enjoyed having an art journal because as I flip through, I can distinctly remember what I was thinking and what I was going through at the time of drawing it. It's just like a memory book. Even though like my memories aren't explicitly drawn in, I can remember what I was thinking while I was drawing it, so that's really nice. This one is a page that got really, I used a lot of like chunky paint on here, and it got really damaged because the pages stuck together, which is kind of sad. But yeah, so this happens a lot with chunky acrylic paint. So just as a warning, if you don't have any idea how to seal the paint, try not to use as much chunky paint. I don't mind this, so I'm probably still gonna just throw paint on the page and see what happens. But if you do mind these rips, just keep that in mind. Maybe just keep the layer really thin when you're painting with acrylics. And then this one is my first collage like ever since starting art journaling, and the limitation for this one was to recycle materials and use them in your spread. So this is from like a takeout bag, and this is from like a Whole Foods bag, and this is from packaging that I got. And I wrote all the things I'm grateful for, and it was really fun. Here's another collage, and I painted this to go with the spread. I recently really enjoyed doing these like smaller scale watercolors and kind of stylizing them a little bit. I wouldn't say I have a super distinct style, but some people tell me that when they see posts in their feed, they can tell that it's my work, so I guess that means I have some sort of style. really liked the colors in the reference image, so I decided to paint her. This is actually me and my boyfriend and my dog. I think I like how the dog turned out the best, honestly. And this is actually painted with acrylic gouache, which I recently got but haven't really experimented with a lot. What I noticed at first is that it dries really soft, which is nice. But in terms of like mixing and painting, I'm not really sure what the difference is yet. It was really fun painting this Polaroid thing. I don't really paint waves a lot, so it's kind of messy, and I'm not really sure I like how the waves look, but you can tell it's waves, so. And this is a new shade of watercolor that I bought, which I really like, so I've been using it a lot. And this is actually probably one of my favorite spreads, even though it's not super realistic in terms of the painting. I really like the concept and the colors that I use. I'm patting myself on the back for being this creative because at this point I wasn't feeling that creative. And I've been adding these like little red blushy patches to a lot of my portraits, and I really like how that looks. This is a poem that I've had in my saved list on Instagram, and I'm really glad I got to finally use it. It's just super cute, and I love the rhythm of the poem. I'm glad that it's saved forever in my art journal. And we're getting to the end. This is another one of my favorite spreads. I really like how kind of impressionistic the forest is and how much it contrasts with this girl. This is the first in a 3-part series that I did using beautiful words I found on Pinterest. And this one is based on Shinrin Yoku, which is a Japanese word that means forest bath or taking a walk through the forest for its restorative benefits. This is a phrase I got from a magazine. This is the second part in my series, which is the word metanoia, which is like the journey of changing your way of life and your spirit and your heart and all those cheesy things. And then in here, I just wrote down the definition of the word on some extra watercolor paper that I had. I thought that was a cute way to use this envelope that I got from a package. And then this is the last page of my journal, but it's not the last spread that I made. On the last page, I just wrote down a quote that I found that I really liked, but it was too long to make a spread for, so I just made some paint blotches and wrote it down. And then this is the last spread, but also the first page. And this is based on the word hai, which is the ritual of enjoying life's simple pleasures. And I wrote all the simple pleasures that I could think of, and I think it's a nice way to start the journal. It sets it on a very positive tone, which I like if I ever want to look back through it. And yeah, so that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope this wasn't too long and boring. Let me know what you thought of the video, and leave a comment down below of more things you want to see from me. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.